Let's go! Giants! Let's go!
What is going on, guys? This is the Inside the Booth podcast. I am your host, Vin. This is episode number 2 of this Inside the Booth podcast as we break down the Giants' future today and also my thoughts on Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones as we get right into it. As we look at this Giants team, they were projected to have 7 wins on the year, and they the expectations were super low for this team with, honestly, the roster was not built to be a winning team. A lot of people were expecting, a high draft pick, and that was the exact opposite. They made the playoffs, they won a round against the Minnesota Vikings, and you look at the odds to start the year, they were plus 105 to have over 7 wins, and minus 125 for the odds to be under 7 wins, and what Brian Daboll did this year was amazing. This team, this offense especially, was super creative, and I thought the defense was good as well. I thought Wink Martindale did a solid job in his first year, and he will be back next year as well, which is huge for this team because I think, with what he's starting to create with this team is, just super good. I think he's putting a lot of pressure on those QBs. I think, what he's doing has just been super good, and we look at Brian Daboll. At first, he was just a QB coach from, Buffalo, and, he did some great things with Josh Allen, and I think he gave, Daniel Jones a solid year as well with what he created and what he developed with Daniel. And, we look at Daniel Jones' stats. He had a 9-7-1 record, started every single game, which was huge. I think, staying healthy for Daniel Jones was huge. And, 3,205 yards and 15 touchdowns, and only throwing 5 interceptions was big. And I didn't think he fumbled the ball that much as well. He had a few fumbles, but he didn't see him coming because, offensive line, broke down a lot. But I think the bright spot in that offensive line is Andrew Thomas. He's one of the best offensive linemen this year in terms of grade. And I think that's what, when they drafted Andrew Thomas, that's what they expected year one. But, he needs some more time to develop, and I think, he got a lot of great reps against some of the best pass rushers in the NFL. But, we look at this team, my opinion, at the start of the year, my expectations were super low with this team. I didn't think they were going to do anything that they did, this year. And making the playoffs, too, is huge for this team. We haven't seen this team make the playoffs in a long time. But, to make the playoffs is just huge for this team. And I think, the future is super bright now. I think, ever since Joe Shane came in, this team has completely turned it around. And they got a lot of draft capital as well. Obviously not drafting until the 25th overall. But you could very well see Joe Shane move up to get a wide receiver, which I have is the biggest need on this team is wide receiver help. You look at this team, Darius Slayton's a UFA, Sterling Shepard's a UFA, and I think the rest of this team in the wide receiver room is not great. I think Isaiah Hodgins is really the only guy left. That's good. I think Richie James is okay, but I don't see him as a big piece to this team in the future. I think he's only going to be here for a short amount of time. And I think, with the wide receivers, my big guy I liked in free agency is Jacoby Myers from the New England Patriots. I think he's got a lot to bring, but I think he's a guy you could definitely look at. I think in the draft, there's a ton of guys that you could look at. I don't think they're going to get Quentin Johnson. I think he's going to go way early, and they're not going to be able to get him. But I think maybe if Jackson Smith-Njigba from Ohio State drops, I think Joe Shane is going to draft him right away. I think he's a guy that has a great future in the NFL. We've seen what he did with Ohio State. He had a solid year. But, the Giants need to fit some roles. And, aside from wide receiver, I think getting another tight end, maybe like Evan Ingram, get him back from Jacksonville. Linebackers are huge. I think I'm kind of glad they cut Tay Crowder. I didn't think his coverage was great. And, even getting, a center. Maybe Garrett Bradbury from Minnesota. Get him to fulfill that center role. And I think just this team just needs, better players. And, they have a lot of money. Right now they have, around $44 million to spend. And I think, with this team, I think the big two questions, and I think that I haven't discussed yet, is what they do with Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. We look at Saquon's stats. He was 4th in yards. He had 1,312. He had 10 touchdowns. That ranked 9th. And 7 rushing touchdowns, by the way. So, I think, Saquon Barkley's got a lot to ask. And I think, the ongoing trend, though, is you look at some of these Super Bowl teams, and by no means I think this Giants team is close to a Super Bowl yet, but you look at some of these Super Bowl teams, and you look at them, they're not getting a lot of money, those running backs. You look at Isaiah Pacheco, he's not getting a lot of money. You look at a few years ago, you look at LeGarrette Blount, he didn't get a lot of money. And you look at the Giants, too, and Ahmad Bradshaw, he didn't get a lot of money either. So I think, with Saquon, I think your number one option is to franchise tag him. I don't know if I'm ready yet to give Saquon Barkley that big extension, which could probably cost you around $14 to $15 million. But I think franchise tagging is a better decision for Saquon Barkley, because I don't know if you could really let him just walk in free agency, because obviously he would get a lot of attention, one of the best running backs in the league, Saquon, but I just don't know if letting him just walk is Brian Daboll's and Joe Shane's decision. I don't think they would like to do that. I think getting him at best on a franchise tag, maybe your other option I had was 5 years at $85 million. You could go with that route, but he might even cost a little more than that, because I know he wants money. And he did a good job with the Giants. I thought he was super creative. Staying healthy was, I think, the biggest if with this start of the year. I think you see Saquon, he's gotten hurt a lot recently. He had that ACL injury, and he hasn't been able to stay on the field. And to get a good season with Saquon was huge. And I think he was maybe fighting off an injury a few times, but he stayed in the game, and I thought he had a really good year. And this team, I'm really excited for this future, and it really depends what they do in the draft. I think they could have an amazing draft. I think there's a lot of solid players in this draft that they can draft. They got a lot of draft capital. But I really wonder what they're going to do with that first rounder. Whether they're going to move up to maybe 20 to the 15 range, or they stay at 25. But nonetheless, I think wide receiver is going to be the first thing off the board. There's been a ton of wide receivers that I've looked at, but my favorite is Jackson Smith-Njigba. I don't know if he's going to go 225. I think he's going to go way earlier, so I think you're going to have to trade up. I think Quentin Johnston's already going to be off. And we look at Zay Flowers. I like Zay Flowers. I think he's a little small, and I don't think he's a great blocker either. But I think he's still got a lot of speed, and I like Zay Flowers. If they draft him, that's great. If they get Addison, that's great. If they get Njigba, that's amazing. Whoever they got, I'll be happy with, but I think your first draft pick has to be a wide receiver. And if not, maybe look defense, but I think you have to go wide receiver no matter what. And also, you look at Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee. I like him too, but I don't know if he's really the guy. I think, you look at the wide receiver class, I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is a good fit for this Giants team. But, this team, I'm really excited for. I've said it so many times. The expectations were low. Some said we were winning 3 games, some we were winning 7. I know I never gave my prediction at the start of the season, but I had them winning 6 games. And obviously, the expectations I was happy with. Making the playoffs, beating the Minnesota Vikings, who I never thought were that team to go on a run. I thought, the Vikings were, I wouldn't necessarily say fraudulent, because I think that's a strong word with sports, calling a team fraudulent, but I thought they weren't that team. I thought their defense was weak, and the Giants exposed them. That was a shootout of a game. I thought it was a great game. I think they played Justin Jefferson well. I think they did a lot of things right, and they were picking picks out of the hat. They were running the Statue of Liberty play, a lot of great stuff. And then when they went to Philadelphia, it was a whole different game. They got smoked, and I was an Eagles team that I thought could go all the way. Obviously, congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs. That was an amazing game. I think that was one of the better Super Bowls we've seen in a while. And the future's bright for the Philadelphia Eagles. They still have a lot of draft capital. They got a first-round pick at I believe it was 10th overall. And, I really wonder what they're going to do. I think they might go cornerback. I think that's a place of need. If they can get that cornerback, I think that could be an even better team, and they could very well make the Super Bowl next year. But we look at the Giants' schedule next year, it's not that easy. And that's why, it would be interesting, to see. But I think, getting Daniel Jones, I don't think we really talked about Daniel Jones too much. I really like Daniel Jones. Did I like him at the start, at the pick, when we drafted him at number 6? No, I think you still would have gotten him at, I believe it was pick 17 at the time. But, I think Daniel Jones' rushing is very underrated. I think when that guy starts running, it's super good, and we saw it in both Minnesota Viking games, regular season and postseason. When he was running, I mean, they couldn't even catch up to him. And I really liked how he, is developing with Brian Dable, and I think he's going to be throwing the ball next year. I don't see this team, necessarily just letting him walk or really. I mean, he might get more money somewhere else, but I think getting Daniel Jones back, whether it's a franchise tag or they're going long term with it, I think they gotta, get Daniel Jones and Saquon back, but for the right price. I don't want them, overspending, because this team still needs a lot of holes, which I mentioned earlier: wide receiver, tight end, linebacker, even cornerback too. I think getting another cornerback pairing with Adoree Jackson could be huge for this team. But nonetheless, also we saw Joe Shane looking at Hendon Hooker from Tennessee. I don't think we're going to get him. He's 25 already. He's coming off that major injury, and I think you're going to have to look at some other, not wide receivers. You're going to have to look at some other cornerbacks. But, I think, the big picture, was what to do with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. And I think you got to get him back. But nonetheless, this has been the end of episode number 2. And that'll do it. So long, guys.